Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 9 a.m. in Toronto, Canada, and I would say good evening in India. A little comment before I go. As you may already know, my name is Nabil Mourad. I'm an Excel MVP. I live in Toronto, Canada, and I have so many Excel lovers and followers from India, whether on my social networks, on Facebook, on YouTube. I also work as a professor of computer applications in a college in Toronto, Canada. And we have so many international students from India, and they're extremely smart. And by the way, I live in the northwest of Toronto. There is another city to the west of where I live called Brampton. And this is a big, big Indian community in Canada, a big Indian community in Canada. And they are also extremely successful business people. So I'm very glad to be with you today. And I have some topics to share with you. If you allow me, I would like to talk about pivot tables and talk about data validation in Excel. These are two of my favorite topics in Excel. Of course, I have a lot more topics that I love, and Excel tools complement each other. But today, due to the limited time we have, I want to talk about pivot tables and talk about data validation with a smooth transition between the two, combining both of them as well. And to start, I want to compare between analyzing our data using pivot tables or analyzing our data using a classic technique, which is formulas and functions that we have been already using for long years. What's the advantage and what can pivot table offer me better than formulas and functions? You may already know that the first Excel spreadsheet was invented in the late 70s by Dan Bricklin and Bob Frankston. However, these two guys did a great job, but they did not invent pivot tables. Pivot tables were introduced for the very first time by an American engineer named Peter Salas in 1986. And this guy said, our data often has a pattern. And if we are able to find a tool that identifies this pattern, we'll be able accordingly to analyze our data, to summarize our data, and create what we call the data model. So that was the beginning of pivot tables, but pivot tables didn't see the light of day until introduced into Excel in 1993. Since then, it became very familiar and very popular among Excel users and often listed as a desirable skill in job specifications. Here is my very first example in which I have multiple lists. And it's very common that we have our data scattered among multiple worksheets or multiple lists or multiple tables or even multiple workbooks. And in this example, I have a table that shows transactional records.
Nabil, if I may interrupt you for a minute, can you just double check if the screen is being shared?
Oh, wonderful. I should have done that. Maybe the excitement of being with my Indian friends.
Right.
Here you go. Can you see my screen now?
Absolutely, crisp and clear.
Thank you. So I have a list which shows transactional records, a date, a product, and unit, and then a code for a state or a province. If I want to recognize the state or province, I have another list which shows the code, the province, and the region. These products belong to multiple categories. If you want to find the category, then we have a third list which shows a product, a code, a retail price, and the category. And for each one of these provinces, we have some managers. If you want to find out about the manager, then we have a fourth list, code, employee number, and the manager. I'm sorry. And then the question is, I would like to calculate the total revenue for each region, or I want to calculate the total revenue for each category, or I want to calculate the total revenue, let's say, for each manager. If I do it the classic way, I will have to extract this information from the other lists, maybe using a Vlookup function. If you are using Microsoft 365, then you can use the XLOOKUP function. And because this list includes 70,000 records, then for each formula I'll be creating, I will have to copy it 70,000 times. Then let's see, how am I going to do that? I want to extract the region from this list, and I'll be using a Vlookup function equal Vlookup. What's your lookup value? My lookup value will be this code, and then I hit comma. Where do you look for it? My table array is this entire list, and I lock it by hitting F4 because I have the intention of copying down. And then I type a comma. What's your column index number, which simply means from which column you need a return value. I need the region, which is column number 3. I type a comma, and then this is an exact match. Then I type 0 for exact, and then I hit enter. I'm going to copy this formula down, and it will take some time. You are copying to 70,000 rows. I can double click and send it down, and here you go. What about the retail and category? Same exact thing. I can create the formula for both of them simultaneously. So I'll be typing equal Vlookup, and then I hit tab. What's your lookup value? My lookup value will be the product name. Then I look at this product, and I want to lock the column. Then I hit F4 3 times, 1, 2, 3. And then I type a comma. I look for it. In this table array, I want to extract the retail and category. Then I select the top row. I use the popular shortcut Shift Control down arrow. And to jump back and lock it, I hit F4 and then comma. For the retail, I need column number 3. For the category, I need column number 4. And I'm going to do that dynamically by using a columns function. Then I type columns, and then I hit tab. I select any 3 cells. I close the bracket. I lock the first cell reference, F4, and then I click at the end, and this is an exact match. Then I type 0. I close the bracket, and then I hit Control Enter, and I would have extracted the retail and category. Let's copy these functions down. Then I double click and send it down. Look how much time it's taking. You are copying a huge number of functions. And I want you to keep in mind how slow it is. Even here it says Excel is not responding. It will be taking 1 or 2 minutes to copy all these functions. And this is not like a weak laptop. It's a powerful processor, and it's taking a long time. And I still have to wait until it copies the function down. And that's exactly the point that I want to show you. When you have a huge number of functions and you are using the classic technique of creating VLOOKUPs, look at this. It's a huge number. It's freezing for now. It's telling me, be patient. I'm calculating like 150,000 different functions. Why are you in a rush? And that happened to me before when I copied all the functions in one single step. Maybe it's a little faster if I copy the retail and then I copy the category. But anyway, it will resume right now. Until then, to calculate the revenue, I will be multiplying the number of units by the retail price. Once it populates this function, I will have to wait a little bit more before I'm able to calculate the revenue. It's taking longer than normal. And here you go. Can you imagine? Can you imagine waiting all this time for Excel to calculate like 150,000 functions? That's not logic. And the solution is coming. The solution is on the way. Now let's calculate the revenue. And I simply type an equal sign. I select the units and I multiply by the retail price. I hit enter. Excel is already tired on the previous functions, and this simple function like this one is not processing. So meantime, let's talk about the solution. Having multiple separate tables is not a comfortable situation because I need to extract information from the different tables. And in this situation, the best option is to add your data to the data model. The best option is to add your data to the data model. And you don't have to go to Power Pivot to add your data to the data model. I'm going to show you indirect and hidden ways of adding your data to the data model. I don't want to close Excel, by the way. If it's freezing right now, then I will skip this part and just go and show you the indirect way of adding the data to the data model. So let's wait for it a little bit more. I'm not happy with that. Sorry for that, Havish. I have to wait for it because I want to compare the two techniques together.
We have all been there.
After it calculates, and here you go, I'm going to copy it all the way down and wait for another half an hour for it to copy down. Excel is exhausted when you provide such a huge number of functions. And you know what? All what I did so far enables me to calculate the total revenue for each region or each category. But if after copying, I decide that I want to calculate the total revenue for each province or the total revenue for each manager, then I need to add like another 150,000 Vlookup function and look at the hassle when copying these functions all the way down. So I'm waiting for it until it copies the function down. And as you have seen with the previous examples with the retail and category, it's taking a very long time. It's taking a really long time. But when I see the alternate solution, you will find it really much better. much better than creating functions, copying these functions, hundreds of thousands of functions, then better add the data to the data model. What does it mean, Power Pivot? And some clients say, isn't pivot table enough? Well, that's one of the problems when you have a huge data set. And sometimes you have a data set that includes a number of records that Excel cannot even accommodate. So the maximum number of rows we have in Excel is 1,048,576. What if I have 2 million records? What if I have 5 million records? Well, handling this huge amount of data in Power Pivot is much more practical. The data lives in the Power Pivot window and is made available for analysis in Excel. The data in the Power Pivot window has lots of advantages, and adding the data to the data model is by going to the Power Pivot tab. But I'm going to show you, once we finish populating this function, I'm going to show you two techniques for adding the data to the data model without going to the Power Pivot tab. So let's hope that it populates the formula. Well, honestly, I delivered this example before and it never took so long, but no problem. Someone might say you might have created the formulas one by one much faster than this. I don't know, maybe next time. Here you go. That's really boring. If I want to analyze my data right now, I'm going to create a pivot table by going to the Insert tab of the ribbon. And I want to create a pivot table, let's say, in a new worksheet. Then I click on Pivot Table, New Worksheet. I hit OK. And then I want the sum of revenue for each region. I drag the region to the rows. I drag the revenue to the values. And then, as you already know, we need to format this. I right-click, select number format. Let's select an accounting number format. And here you go. If you want to represent it by a chart, then the shortcut is Alt F1. And here is a chart that represents the sum of revenue for each one of the regions. We spent a very long time. Then what's the alternate option? The alternate option is to add the data to the data model without even going to the Power Pivot tab. Even if you don't have the Power Pivot tab added to the ribbon, I can add the data to the data model. Let me show you how am I going to do that. I have the same exact data in another worksheet, but I formatted them as tables. And Excel users must know the difference between lists and tables. A table is defined in Excel as being a list with more functionality. You can convert a list into a table in 6 different ways. The easiest technique is to hit the shortcut Control-T. T stands for table. To convert your list into a table, you have one single mandatory requirement, which is having column headers at top. And that's why if I want to convert a list into a table, let's go to the classic sheet. And if I want to convert this list into a table, Excel is going to ask me one single question. Do you have column headers at top? So if I hit Control-T, look at this. My table has headers. I'm not converting this one into a table. I go to the source worksheet. I already converted each one of these into a table. And when you convert a list into a table, you get the Table Design tab. And to the upper left corner, you have the name of the table. It's a good practice to name the tables instead of having just anonymous names, table 1, table 2, table 3. I named this one Product T. I named the second one Province T. I named the third one Category T. And I named the last one Manager T. Now, the question is, how am I going to add them to Power Pivot, to the data model without going to the Power Pivot tab? Well, all what I'm going to do is to create relationships between these different tables. And the name of the table will change once I create the relationship, denoting that it has been added to the data model. Let me show you how I'm going to do that. And once I create relationships, as if all these tables became one single source of truth, I'm able to extract information from another table through the relationship, exactly as I did with the Vlookup function, but it will do it in a twinkling of an eye. To create relationships, I go to the Data tab of the ribbon, and on the Data tab of the ribbon, I want to create relationships. And I have it here. My screen is a little bit squished. It's to the right side of the Data tab. I click on relationships. As you can see, I don't have any relationships yet. So if I click on new, look at this. Select the table and the matching field. So I'm going to click on the first drop list. And here it says, I want you to focus on this. It says worksheet table, category T, worksheet table, manager T. Let's select the product table first. And from the product table, I want to link it to the province. Then I'll be selecting the matching field, which is the code. And then when I go to the second one, which is the province table, I want the matching field, which is the code as well. I select the code, I hit OK, and I would have created my relationship. This is the first relationship created. And when I try to create a second relationship, let's say I'm going to connect product to the product in the category table. When I click on new, look at the names changing. In this drop list, now it says data model product T, data model province T. You used them, you created relationships, we added them to the data model. Although I didn't go to the Power Pivot tab, let's do it one more time. I select the product table, and from the product table, I want the product name. And then I select the category table, which is still a worksheet table. And I select the product from the category table as well. And I hit OK. Now I created the second relationship. Let's create the last relationship, which will show the manager. Then I click on new. And then when I click on the down arrow, 3 tables have been used in relationships. They have been added to the data model. I'll be using the province table. And from the province table, I want the code. And from the related table, I click on the down arrow. This time I'll be using the manager. And from the manager, I'll be using the code as well. And I hit OK. And I would have created my relationships. If you want to look at the data model, you can go to the Power Pivot tab. But if you want to create the pivot table directly without even going to the Power Pivot tab, that will be beautiful. Then I go to the Insert tab of the ribbon and I click on the down arrow for pivot table and I select from data model. I'm using Microsoft 365. This menu has recently changed, but you have the same option in the classic menu. You just check a little box in the lower part of the wizard that says add this data or use the existing data model. I don't remember the exact wording, but you have an option to select the data model. I'll be creating from the data model. It asks me, where would you like to create it? And let's say I'm going to create it in a new worksheet. When I hit OK, look at this. These are all the tables. A good practice here is to change the layout of the pivot table field list, because when you have lots of tables and in each one of these tables, you have so many fields, then the interface is little squished here. So I'm going to change the layout of my pivot table field list by clicking on the tools button on the right side, and I select the second option. Now I have all the tables on the left-hand side. I want to add, let's say, the different categories. Then I click and expand the category. I select the category name. It has been added to the rows. That's very fast. And I would like to calculate the revenue. Well, the revenue is not available in any one of these tables. Then what I need to do is to create a little measure to calculate the revenue. A measure is also called a calculated field. I wish I had the revenue available in one of the tables, but we don't have that. So I need to calculate the retail price. I need to calculate the retail price from the category table by the unit price in the product table. And for each calculation, for each row, I want to add the total. Where am I going to create the measure? I can create it in the category table. I can create it in the product table. Then I'm going to create it in the product table. To create this measure, I right-click on the product table, and then I select Add Measure. What do you want to call this measure? I want to call it revenue. Then I type revenue. How do you calculate it? I might add a description if I want. I will be using a SUMX function. Then I type SUMX, and then I hit Tab. The SUMX function requires two arguments. The first argument, the name of the table in which it's living, and my table is the product table. Then I type product T, and then I hit Tab, and then I type a comma. Now it's asking for an expression. What's the expression? The expression is to calculate the units. I type an opening square bracket, and from the IntelliSense list, I hit Tab and select the units, and then I want to multiply it by the related retail price. I want for each record, look at the product and then travel through the relationship and get me the related retail price. Then I'll be using a related DAX function. DAX stands for data analysis expression, and I'll be typing related. I open bracket, and here it's asking me, what's the field? Based upon the relationships you created, which field you want to return? I want the retail price in the category table. I double click on that, and then I close the bracket for the SUMX for the related function first, and I close the bracket for the SUMX function. I want to check my DAX formula. I get a green check mark denoting that I don't have any issues. I want to format it as currency, and then I hit OK, and now I have the revenue that has been added to the product table. I can simply drag it to the value. Unlike the previous pivot table, I'm not adding load to Excel because Power Pivot has an extremely powerful compression engine and an extremely powerful calculation engine. So if I want to include the region as well, that's not a problem. Then I go to the province table, and then I drag, let's say, the region above the category, and I would have created my pivot table. I can restructure my pivot table in any way I want. I have all the information, although I didn't create any functions. I just created one single measure. So my recommendation for you is to always add your source data to the data model. And if you want to have a look at the data model, you go to the Power Pivot tab, you click on Manage, and Power Pivot should open on top of Excel. And here are the different tables, the product table, the province table, the category, and the manager. And if you want to look at the relationships that we created in a tabular structure, then I click on Diagram View, and here are the different relationships that we created. And because I'm in the data model, I want to show you a nice example. I'm going to minimize for now or go to the data view. And I want to show you some functionalities that also saves time, available in the data model and not available when you create regular pivot table. Let me minimize to go back to Excel, or I can go back to Excel by clicking on the Excel icon in the upper left corner. I'm back to Excel. I want to look at the very first pivot table that I created. Here I have the different regions. Let me delete the chart. I created this pivot table based upon the worksheet having the classic functions, and I would like to create multiple levels of fields. So I go to the pivot table field list, and let's say for each region, I want to add the category. Then I have the Atlantic region and the different categories. Whenever you have multiple fields in the rows area, then these fields will appear in one single column, and that's not really practical. What we usually do, we separate the multiple fields into two columns. And another thing we want to do is to bring the labels here at the top. I can type region, I can type category, but to make it dynamic and at the same time split the two fields into two columns, then I'm going to change the layout of my pivot table. There are two layouts that can solve the problem. If I go to the table design tab, to the left side, I have report layout. And then here, if I change it to tabular form, I will be splitting the region and category into two columns and bring the labels dynamically. Then I have region, category, and sum of revenue. Now, it's also another option that we might have when I select the region. I can be repeating the region by clicking on report layout one more time and select repeat all item labels. And I have the region and category and the sum of revenue. You see how much time I spent for doing this? Look if I want to do it from the data model. I go to the data model, I have it open already. Then I click on the data model and look at this option. I click on the down arrow for pivot table and I'll be selecting flattened pivot table. So I select flattened pivot table. Where would you like to create it? I want to create it in an existing worksheet. So let me delete, let me minimize, and then I don't want this range. I want to go to this worksheet, which is flattened, and let's create it in cell A3, and then I hit OK. When I hit OK, now I get the pivot table field list, and I want to create a flattened pivot table based upon the data in the data model, and I want it to look like the one that I just created in sheet 1. How am I going to do that? In the flattened one, I have my power pivot field list. I select the region from the province table. I select the region to the rows, and then I select the category from the category table. Here is the category. I put it below the region. Look at this. And at the same time, I want the revenue, the measure that I created, and I'm done, and I get the same layout. Should you wish to select any one of the existing styles, you can do that. You can change the style and select any style of your preference. Then, without having to change layouts, without having to repeat the labels, the flattened pivot table is giving me the same exact option. I want to show you one more option of creating pivot tables from the data model, and I call it the one-click dashboard. So what do you mean by one-click dashboard? I'm going to create a dashboard with one single click, as simple as that. What is a dashboard? A dashboard is defined as being a graphical summary of the most important information that answers questions about your data, that answers questions about your business, consolidated and arranged in one single screen so that information can be monitored at a glance. Excel also makes your dashboard interactive. And I want to show you, we have courses on creating dashboard, but I want to show you the simplest way of creating a simple dashboard with one single click. Let's go. I go to the data model. I switch to the data model, and I want to create a simple dashboard consisting of 4 charts. I click on the down arrow for pivot table, and I select this option, 4 charts. And here it's asking me, where would you like to create it? I'm going to create it in this worksheet named one click. I minimize, and I select one click, and let's say I'm going to dump it in this cell, and then I hit OK, and another OK. Now look at this. I have placeholders for 4 different pivot charts, and I'm going to customize each one of them, and then take your time formatting each one of them and change the chart type. But the question is, I didn't have to create 4 pivot tables. I didn't have to create 4 charts. I just need to customize them. So let's see the revenue, let's say for each, let's make it the province first or the region first. Let's go to province. I select the region. I put it to the axis, and I select from the product table. Let's select the revenue, and here you go. I created my first chart. And look what happens when I create the other charts. Let's say in the second one, I want to show the revenue by manager. I select the manager name, and then I select the revenue from the product table. That's the measure I calculated. Here I see like the revenue is pretty equal. You can change the chart type by right-clicking on the chart, select change chart type. And if you wish, you can make it a line chart. That might be a little bit more useful. Right now, look at this. It looks like a straight line, not really interesting. But when I add a slicer, it will be much more interesting. Now let's create by province. So from the province table, I check the box for province. From the product table, I check the box for revenue. And I created another one. Should you wish to change this one, so I'm going to change the chart type. I wish I could use the tree map, but I can't use it directly in a pivot table. In another tutorial, I might show you how you can use the charts that are not available in creating, when creating the tree map or the other charts that are not available, like the funnel chart, and create them directly from the pivot table. But anyway, let's select a pie chart, and I'll be selecting a donut chart, and here you go. Then you start customizing, you start customizing each one of the charts accordingly. Remember that we just created them with one single click from the data model. And that's another advantage. So many advantages and practical uses of the data model. And because I want to switch to the drop list, I want to show you another example where I combine the Power Pivot functionality along with the drop list. Let me show you an example. So here in this example, I have a date, a region, a manager, a customer, cost of goods sold, and sales. And I would like to calculate the total sales for each region and the total cost for each region. And I want to calculate as well the profit generated for each region. As always, I like to create a pivot table and add my data to the data model. I showed you in the previous example that I can add my data to the data model just by creating relationships. But I'm going to show you a second technique for doing that without going to Power Pivot. I select any single cell and I want to create a pivot table in the preparation worksheet, which is this one. I'll be creating it here. Then I go to the Insert tab of the ribbon, click on Pivot Table to open the pivot table from table range. I want to create it in an existing worksheet. I go to the prep worksheet, select cell A4, but look at this. I also want to add my data to the data model. Then I check this box, add this data to the data model. This is the second way of adding my data to the data model without even going to Power Pivot. I hit OK. And here is my pivot table placeholder. Let's check the box for the region. And I want to add the total sales, the total cost, and the total profit. In this case, I want to create some measures. Then I right click on the table, click on add measure. The first measure will be total sales. And I'll be using a sum function to do that. What do you want to sum? Of course, I want to sum the sales. I open a square bracket and select the sales and close the bracket and format it as currency. When I hit OK, it will be added automatically to my pivot table. Okay. Next time I'll use a different technique to add it directly to the pivot table. Here is the total sales. I want to add another measure. I can even go to the Power Pivot tab if I wish. Without opening Power Pivot, I click on measure, new measure, and then this time I want the total cost, and I'll be using another sum function. Open square bracket and select the total cost. So let's open a square bracket and that let's type the cost. I can see cost of goods sold. I can see the field. Oh. Ew. That's not the proper table. I'm not creating it in the proper table. I need to change the table. Okay, let's do it one more time. New measure. I want to create it in the source table. I will name it total cost. And I'll be using another sum function. Open square bracket, select the cost of goods sold, and then close the bracket, format it as currency. And then when I hit OK, it should add directly here. This technique adds it to the pivot table directly. The final measure is the profit, which is the difference between these two. And I click on new measure, and then I say total profit. I'm creating 3 measures. I might be creating a lot more. And this time I want to use a SUMX function. I need to provide the name of the table, which is source, and then comma. I want the difference between the total sales minus the total cost. And then I close the bracket for the SUMX function, format it as currency, and then hit OK, and it has been added. I want to be able to create a drop list to switch between total sales, total cost, total profit, and represent it on a chart. To create a drop list, I select cell A1, and I go to the data tab of the ribbon, and I click on data validation. I want to allow a list. Then I select list, and I'll be selecting these 3 values. I hit OK, and I have a drop list. Let's say I select total sale. And because I want to represent one single measure at a time in my pivot chart, then I'm going to create a helper table, a preparation table. That's the same technique I use if I want to create a tree map chart, which is not available for creation directly from a pivot table. So here I type an equal sign, and I say I want to reference this cell. I hit enter, and I copy down. I would have copied the regions. It's a good practice to change the label. Let's do that. Design tab, report layout, show in tabular form. Then I have region. In cell G4, I want to reference the drop list. To make it dynamic, then I type an equal sign and click on the drop list and then hit enter. Now, what I would like to do, if I select total sales, I want these numbers. If I select from the drop list total cost, I want these. If I select total profit, then I want these. And to do that, I'll be using an index function equal index, and then I hit tab. Where is the range from which you need a return value? I need a return value from this range, and I lock it. And then I hit comma, the second argument. What's the row number? Well, I want all the rows. Then I skip this argument. And finally, what's the column number? The column number will be returned by a match function. And I type match, and then I hit tab, and I select the value above, and I lock it F4. I type a comma. I want to match it in this range, and I lock it F4. And I have to provide one more argument, which is an exact match. If you are using Microsoft 365, you can omit this argument by using the XMatch function, which defaults to exact match. Now I close the bracket for the match, I close the bracket for the index, and then I hit enter. It spills to the adjacent cells because I'm using Microsoft 365, but in your case, you need just to copy it down. I want to format these numbers. I hit Control-A to select them, and then Control-Shift-4 to format them as currency. And now I can create my pivot chart. How do I create it? With the shortcut Alt-F1, I would have created my pivot chart. I'm not going to spend time formatting it, but this is my pivot chart. I also have a dynamic label here in which I'm joining whatever comes from the drop list with the text by region. Then I can create a dynamic title, F2 equals sign, and click on cell D1. I have a dynamic title. Now let's see how dynamic it is. I'm hiding the source data. Let's resize it and look at this. If I change from the drop list from total sales to total profit, then everything updates and everything is dynamic. If I change it to total cost, then it's dynamic. Then you spend some time customizing your pivot chart. So I showed you some examples of using the data model and creating some measures. I showed you the flattened pivot table. We compared between creating relationships and creating lots of functions. And because I said I'm going to switch smoothly from pivot tables to drop list, I used this example in which I combined the functionality of pivot table with the functionality of drop list. Let me share with you one final example of creating drop list. I'm a big fan of drop list, and by the way, this is my book on pivot tables, and it's available on Amazon, but it's also available on my website, officeinstructor.com, at 80% discount. And as I said, I'm a big fan of drop list, and this is my other book on data validation, a backdoor to master Excel. You are quite familiar with creating drop lists. It can be as simple as selecting any single cell, and then you go to the data tab of the ribbon, click on data validation, and say, I want a list. So if I type A, comma B, comma C, comma D, just imagine we created a drop list. And from the drop list, I can select any option I want. And from the drop list, I'm ensuring the integrity of my worksheet because I'm not typing anymore. I just typed once. And if the drop list is feeding a formula, then you can make your formula dynamic, as I showed you in the previous example, when I was able to switch from total cost to total sales to total profit on the fly, thanks to the functionality of a drop list. I can spend a full day talking about data validation, but I want to share with you an interesting example. In this example, I want to create a drop list from which I select one of the employees. But if my selection is managers, then I want the contents of the drop list to change and show me a list of managers. So the contents of the same drop list will change, and I will have two different sets of options in the same drop list based upon my selection. To do that, I need to combine the functionality of drop lists with the functionality of naming cells and ranges. I'm going to select this range, having the header managers, and I want to tell Excel, would you please use the top row managers in naming the entire range? And I do that by going to the Formulas tab of the ribbon. And here I select Create from Selection. Top row is checked. So when I hit OK, I would have created a name, Managers. Let me check. If I go to the name box and click on the down arrow and I select Managers, it becomes highlighted, denoting that Excel recognizes this range by its name. I want to do the same for the second range, All Employees. Then I select it. This time I'll be using the shortcut Control-Shift F3 to open the same dialog box. And I hit OK. Let me check. I deselect. I go to the drop list, All Employees, and the range is recognized by Excel. The function that I'll be creating in the data validation drop list will say, if in cell B1, I have the text managers, then change the contents of the drop list and return the entire range managers. Otherwise, return the entire range All Employees. Let me create the function here. So I'll be typing equal if. I shouldn't be creating it in the worksheet. I'm just demonstrating what I intend to do. So I hit the tab key. If in cell B1, let me move it a little bit up. Let's say here, equal if, and then I hit tab. If in cell B1, I have the text managers, and because it's text, I have to type it in double quotes. Then in double quotation, I type managers, and I close the double quotation. Let's make it capital. I close the double quotation. If in B1, I have the text managers, comma, then I want the named range managers. When you provide the named range, you don't need to type a double quotation. And I'll be typing manager. And then I hit the tab key and then comma. Otherwise, what do you want? Otherwise, if it's not equal to managers, then I want the other named range All Employees. And I type on and I hit the tab key and I close the bracket. That's the function that I'll be using for creating my two-in-one drop list, two different contents in the same drop list. Let me copy it, Control X, and then I hit escape and then select B1. I don't really need to create it in the worksheet. I'll be creating it in the data validation dialog box. The shortcut for the data validation dialog box is Alt-DL, and that's why I named my book, if I zoom in, Alt-DL. That's because it's a very popular shortcut in Excel. Okay, Alt-DL, Tab-L-Tab. I'm in the source box and I paste the function that I created. And let's enjoy. I hit OK. I don't have any contents right now. Then I should see All Employees. Click on the down arrow. I see All Employees. Let's select one of the employees. I click one more time. I still see All Employees. What if I select managers? My if conditional function says, if we read managers, and I have conditional formatting, by the way, When we read managers in cell B1, the contents of the drop list should change. And now I see the second list, and I have 2-in-1 data validation drop list. I'm just showing you a simple example, but if you want to go beyond and far beyond, then I want to share with you one of my tutorials on my YouTube channel in which I create 5 different drop lists. I encourage you to watch this tutorial, the unbelievable 5 drop list in one single cell. And of course, this requires a little bit more advanced functionality. That was my presentation for you today. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I enjoyed teaching all of you. And I'm done.
Thank you so much, Nabil. If I may just ask you for one more minute for one piece of advice from your side. Since I teach a lot of MBAs here in India, for students who are about to start their corporate career and they will be working on Excel extensively, could you share some tips with them? You know, what should the learning journey be like? What are the things they should keep in mind? Some common mistakes they make that they should avoid?
So you want me to share some of the resources, you mean?
Not resources specifically, but from your experience, any piece of advice that you would like to share with MBA students specifically who are about to start their corporate career and they'll be working on Excel?
Okay. This very simple question, Havish, is not actually simple. You know why? Because many, and I see that at the college, when I deliver a course, whether it's in Word, in PowerPoint, and students say, well, I'm already using Word and PowerPoint. That's fine. You can learn Word and PowerPoint on your own by trial and error, but you can't do that in Excel. It's impossible to do that in Excel. I have been using Excel for over 20 years now, and I've been teaching it for 20 years, and I'm still learning. Every day I'm learning. So my advice is to attend a structured course in Excel, whether it's an online course like on any one of the platforms or one of your courses. So you might be providing this, but my advice is to attend a structured course, leaving no gaps in the knowledge. Then you go from basic to intermediate to advanced, and you can keep going to any level you want, but just by learning some scattered tools that will not make an advanced use.
Yeah, I think that is very helpful. I think both the points that do not learn in a scattered way, and the other fact that you can never stop learning, right? I mean, the way it advances, we have to continuously keep on updating ourselves.
Yeah, that's correct. I agree, 100% correct.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nabil. I think this was extremely helpful to everyone. You know, I also had a few small gaps in my knowledge that got filled today after watching your video.
Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for inviting me. And I want to say hello to all your audience and all your fans and subscribers, and all my fans and subscribers in India as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Take care.